Lake Superior is beautiful. It's cold. It's deep. And for centuries, deadly. Beneath her glassy surface and along her rugged shores are tales so strange, so chilling, they sound more like folklore than fact. But what if those ghostly ships, wandering spirits, lake monsters, and cursed lighthouses were more than just mere stories? Tonight, my guest is Chad Lewis, a researcher, author, and globe-trotting explorer of the unexplained. With nearly 30 years chasing legends, Chad has turned his gaze to the largest of the Great Lakes, collecting more than 24 bone-chilling accounts from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ontario. From haunted hotels and phantom dogs to the Wendigo, water panthers, and a deadly UFO encounter. We're diving into the murky waters of one of the most mysterious regions in North America. This is Supernatural Lake Superior on the Paranormal 60.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to this baloney.
He won't float. He doesn't stand for baloney.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Good evening, my darklings. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending a little time with us here. Supernatural Lake Superior. Chad Lewis is the author of this book with a foreword by David Weatherly. Chad is here to discuss this topic with us this evening. Chad, it's always great to catch up with you. How you doing?
Greetings from the back roads of Wisconsin.
You have always got a great way and excitement and passion for this paranormal field and researching and hearing these stories, collecting these tales. What turned your attention this time to Lake Superior?
Growing up in Wisconsin, I've always been fascinated by the Great Lake. For me, it's the best of the Great Lakes. It's gigantic. Just to put it in some perspective, if you were to combine all the other Great Lakes together, you'd have to throw in 3 more Lake Eries just to get to the size of Superior. So I was always fascinated by it. And on my travels over the last 30 years, I've made a lot of expeditions to the lake. And what is out there for folklore, though, is mainly haunted ghost ships and lighthouses. And I love both of those.
Right.
But there was so much that wasn't being covered of other oddities and folklore that I decided I better put something together for those like me who want a little bit more than your standard creepy haunted lighthouse.
Well, that's a place to start, though. So let's use that as a jumping off point. Haunted lighthouses. I mean, that seems to be prevalent everywhere. Why do you think a lighthouse is such a focus for strange supernatural activity?
If we look at one of the theories of ghosts and hauntings, that they feed on energy or life force of some sort, that we have to keep in mind that for a lot of these lighthouse keepers, it was a terrible career. Nasty weather, dangerous conditions, isolation. So often, maybe some of these lighthouse keepers loved their job so much or thought they were doing such a great service for the community that they continue to do it even from death. And then, of course, we also look at the water having some effect, that obviously most of these lighthouses are on the shoreline. So if the water itself is special or unique, perhaps that plays into it and adds to the romance of the old innkeeper.
Now, there is something strange about lighthouses and the people that take that job. Like you said, there's a lot of isolation factor. And around the world, there are these really heartbreaking, heart-wrenching stories of many that took their own lives and sometimes of their own families in very tragic and unforeseen ways. People that they thought were normal in every other way, suddenly doing something horrific. Do you think that it's simply because of being off and isolated from the regular community in that part of the world that can break someone? Or do you think with water sprites and elemental spirits and energies like that, there's something more sinister that we have not yet uncovered that maybe stalks the people whose job it is to be that keeper of the light, to be the safe zone.
What a great insight. I think it's probably a combination that we know the effects of isolation, which is when people are put into prisons and a solitary confinement. It can only be for certain lengths because we know what that does to the human brain. And then you start throwing in how some people are affected by bad weather, that all this turmoil. And then I think you touched on this, Dave. Great insight here that maybe there's something else at play here as well, that maybe these lighthouse keepers are picking up on what the indigenous people knew about the lakes for many generations, that the lake itself is something special, that many cultures set up base camp or their village or their town along the lake, even though there were other means of water and fish that were not as deadly and powerful as Lake Superior, but something drew them to this lake. And it may be that same something that is driving the lighthouse keepers insane or to the point where they take their own life.
Well, we know of these elemental spirits, these energies that seem to be eternal, that have always existed. And you think about, why would things from that era or from that, elemental range be so angry? But look at what humanity has done to our environment and specifically to our waterways. For years, they've been dumped with toxic chemicals and wastes and treated poorly. So many of our water sources around the world are now tainted. If there is some kind of primal energy to the thing, it would only seem natural that it would fight back from time to time. And maybe you hear these stories of everything from La Llorona, right, who is often seen near bodies of water. You hear about phantom ghosts, the things that are trying to call you in, the sirens, the mermaids. They're trying to get you in the water. It's almost like it's trying to stop humanity and the damage that we're doing. And I wonder if, because that lighthouse is a beacon to show the dangers surrounding it, if it comes kind of like in the demonic realm, it becomes a target for darker things to try to stop it.
You could probably write an entire book about this theory of the land, the water, the air fighting back. And sometimes the damage is so far gone that we might need a reminder that pull it back, get it together. One of my favorite portions of Lake Superior is the Canadian side, because for the most part, it's undeveloped compared to American standards, that you're not going to find a resort every 10 miles or a gas station or a Target or Walmart, that they've left it practically unchanged on their entire side of the lake. And maybe for good reason. Maybe they've learned over the years that the lake itself is alive. Many believe that Lake Superior is its own entity, that it's not just a lake to go visit, but it's a lake to be respected and treated as an equal, or maybe even greater than an equal.
Wouldn't it be interesting too, right? The theory of the memory of water, and that we're finding in different ways, things have an interesting way of communicating with one another. And there are many people that believe that there are bases for alien life in many of the Great Lakes and in our oceans around the world. Well, if you want to keep something from going forward, it becomes very Scooby-Doo like, right? It's old man Chad Lewis at the theme park dressing up as the eerie specter to keep people away, right? Could it be that the ghosts, the ghost ships, the creepy creatures that we see and encounter are projections, even from alien forces that are trying to keep us away from these areas and make people worried about curses and fear, and really igniting that to be kind of a folkloric element to, we always talk about folklore having this basis in really kind of being a warning. You don't go by the water's edge because, the sirens or the water sprites can get you, or the fairies, or La Llorona, right? There are all of these fables that always seem to kind of try to protect us. But maybe there's another element to it, that these things are projected in order to push us away.
That is one of the theories on Lake Superior. If you stop into any roadside attraction or gift shop along the lake, you'll find a poster you can buy that shows the hundreds of known shipwrecks that have occurred in the lake. And these are just the known ones. There are a lot more that we probably don't know where they are, how they went down, but they were often thought to be a cautionary tale that we were doing something wrong, shipping, or that if you went out to try to steal the copper from Isle Royale, that the Mizipishu would come after you, the great water panther of the lake. And there were many tales of this, people going out and stealing the copper for whatever reason they wanted, and then their canoe or boat would be capsized and they would drown because the great water panther was protecting the sacredness of Lake Superior. So the idea that these things are coming up as a cautionary warning, stay away, do not come here. Unfortunately, for a lot of people like myself, that just makes us more excited to go there. So I think maybe the terms need to change over the years, that once the Scooby-Doo of creating a lighthouse ghost to keep tourists away, well, now tourists seem to flock to those kind of things. So maybe Mother Nature needs to come up with a new plot of how to awaken us, if you will.
Now, listen, I'm going to get all conspiratorial because I love doing this on episodes when we start getting into the weird. As soon as I start talking about maybe things are trying to frighten us off, beg us off, I've noticed that when I've done shows on UFOs and aliens and sometimes about darker forces, we start having technological issues. And as soon as I brought that up, your audio is starting to get really weird, Chad. Your microphone's crackling up. We're getting some strange issues. So I don't know if maybe we're getting a little too close to the truth.
Well, I think around the world, many cultures refuse to talk about certain things because they felt that if you talked about these things, it became real, that when you go looking for the weird comes looking for you. Some people might call it synchronicity or coincidences or just odd luck. But I found over and over when I'm talking about these things, when I'm out exploring, that it does seem to be connected to something bigger.
Now, you mentioned the water panther. You were getting a little audio dodgy at that point. That is something new to me. Can you go back and give us a little bit of the history and background on the water panther?
Sure. Lake Superior is thought to be protected by the great Mizipishu. And just like the Wendigo, there are dozens and dozens of spellings of this creature. There are dozens of pronunciations based on the tribe, the village, the people that believed in it. But this was the great protector of the lake. This was stopping freight ships from taking too much of the lake or stealing the copper or the iron ore around the lake. This was the great protector that would be there. And again, if you weren't being respectful, it could capsize your boat. And it looked like a modern day dragon, that a lot of the depictions of it have horns, tusks, scales down its back, very sharp claws. What we know today as the look of the hodag out of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, the mythical lumberjack creature, that was based almost entirely on Mizipishu. So if you know what a hodag looks like, that's the depiction of the water panther, except for the fact that it can shapeshift at will if it wants, and it can control and manipulate the weather and the waters so that if any harm were to come to it, it would bring more harm back on you. And that was a theme of Lake Superior, that a lot of these alleged protectors of the lake, if you merely even attempted to harm them, you'd be in some serious danger.
Now, water panther, do you think that they selected a title like that because panthers are so stealthy? What you describe sounds more like a dragon or a more possessed version of Nessie, right? Why
Yeah.
panther? What's the association there?
Panther had the power, the insight, the intellect, and it was happened to be in water. And it's not just exclusive to Lake Superior. There are water panthers through lakes, rivers, and streams throughout the world. I remember when we were going through a lot of the mysterious drowning of men in Wisconsin, college-age kids that were drowning in the lakes. There were a few people talking about it being the revenge of the water panther of the lakes and the streams and the rivers here. So even though this is a very old legend and folklore of Mizipishu, we have pictographs drawn at Lake Superior Provincial Park in Canada along the rocky shore of Lake Superior. They drew pictures of Mizipishu. That's how much they respected it. And even though it's hundreds of years old, we still have modern twists to it, which I'm fascinated by.
Is there a tradition, especially in these areas like Lake Superior, to cross its waters or to fish its waters? Are there sacrifices that are made? I know some of the indigenous tribes would capture their fish and release a portion of it back to the water as like a thank you to the water gods or the fish gods or whatever they believed in, as a way to say, we appreciate what you've given us, we won't take it all. Is there known traditions among the shipping fare that are out there as well?
Yes. And a lot of it, even for non-superstitious people or may not have the same beliefs as others along the lake, many, especially in the sailing community, will bring offerings for the lake, whether it's traditional tobacco or other offerings for safe passage or a good harvest of fish, only taking what they need. And that's been something that has happened along the shoreline for generations after generations, that they knew and respected the animals, the sturgeon, the other known fish in there, that they would make use of the entire catch so as to not offend the lake by being wasteful. And sadly, sometimes that doesn't occur with commercial fishermen these days, but I think the idea of only taking what is absolutely necessary is something that's practiced along the lake. When a lot of people do catch and release, they won't even keep the fish they catch out of Lake Superior.
So Supernatural Lake Superior is the book. Chad Lewis, the author, and our guest this evening. We have a link for Chad's website on today's program guide, so you can find it easily. For those of you watching live, you can also find it right here on the YouTube live stream. So make sure that you go check it out and check out all of the amazing books. Chad is one of the best out there and has written countless books on every kind of element of the strange and supernatural, so you're going to love them. And then do me a favor, you know what I'm going to say already. Don't just buy the books, read the books, rate and review the books on places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever you're purchasing your books, because that goes a long way to help get more exposure for our authors. Supernatural Lake Superior, the book we're discussing right now with Chad. This is kind of an off-site deal, but the sea witch and water witches. Do you know much about those theories and what that exactly is? Is that just another way of calling something an elemental or a skinwalker, or is there more of a tradition of witchcraft and witchery that surrounds these bodies of water?
A lot of my colleagues who specialize in the occult a lot more heavily than I do always talk about the importance and the power of water and being around water. And I think a lot of the sea witch stories are conflated with siren stories of the beautiful seductress women that will often lure men with their beautiful voices or their appearance to the rocky shorelines or shallow water, and they'll meet their watery grave there. They're thought to have sinister motives, although they can also be helpful to humans when they wish. And I think it's an offshoot when you have sirens. You have mermaid stories as well, being able to manipulate the water and control the weather. And then witches as well. That stories of witches, what we would think of occult practices or maybe some hoodoo stuff, they're very prevalent as well. And a lot of people just throw them into the same category, because I think if you're out on the water, let's say you're fishing from the shoreline or you're out in a canoe and you see this mysterious female beast out in the water, you may not immediately say, hey, wait a minute, is that a witch or a siren or a mermaid? your first thought is probably turn the canoe around and go back to shore.
I gotta tell you, Chad, it just makes me wonder, how ugly were the women back in the day that so many of the captains and pirates would talk about these beautiful sirens, these mermaids, these things with allure and beautiful voices. And now we look at them and say, well, they were probably seals and walrus or dew dogs or whatever they're called. And you look at them and their beautiful sea song is, you know, I laugh my ass off because I think, how bad was it in the female department back then that these were the alluring, sexual, beautiful things with a gorgeous voice calling us forward?
Yeah, and how terrible was the alcohol back then to produce this?
Been pretty good.
Yeah, I've given this a lot of thought, and partly I think that back in the old days, most people, seafaring people, were men. And they'd be away from their friends, family, loved ones, their wife, their sweetheart, whatever it was, for months, maybe years on end. So they became lonely. And I think partly the stories of the siren or the mermaids or the witches, that deep down, I think it gave men comfort and solace knowing that there was a woman, powerful being out there kind of overwatching them, taking care of them, because this was at a traditional time when women did most of the cooking, the cleaning, the clothing, traditional household stuff for these men. So the idea that there was this benevolent woman out there watching over them, even when their women couldn't do it, I think was comforting to them. But I agree with you 100% that if you see a walrus or a sea lion out there, under the worst conditions, you're not seeing, a supermodel.
Or what I guess our interpretation of a supermodel would be. Maybe back then, in comparison and being on the high seas or in these rocky waters for long periods of time, any port in a storm, I guess there's a reason for that statement, Chad.
Yes, I think you're on to. I think your next book, Dave, is the Women of the Seas from the 1800s.
Beauty in the eye of the beholder, sea witches, and more. We'll do that. We have to take a very quick break. We'll come back with more Chad Lewis. Let's talk about ghost ships. Let's talk about the UFO phenomena and more with Supernatural Lake Superior. We'll do that when we return right here to the very best in paranormal programming. I'm Dave Schrader. This is the Paranormal 60.
Now, during the Halloween season, the veil between the worlds gets thinner and the chills get real. Oh, so very real. Something is waiting in the dark, and it's calling your name. So answer the call this Halloween season for the Paranormal 60 presents Halloween Haunts and Hijinks, October 9th through the 12th, for a supernatural weekend you'll never forget. It's being held at the historic haunted Palmer House Hotel in Sauk Center, Minnesota. Join Dave Schrader from the Holzer Files, Ghosts of Devil's Perch, and the host of the Paranormal 60 podcast. He's teaming up with Dalen Spratt from Ghost Brothers and Phantom Forensics. And we have heart-centered, intuitive Diet Renee for a weekend packed with spine-tingling experiences. You'll have 2 nights of live investigations and paranormal experiments, interactive workshops, gallery readings, and meet and greets, live presentations with experts themselves. This isn't just an event, it's a doorway to the unknown. So you have to ask yourself, do you dare cross it? Now, tickets are limited, so please book your Halloween Haunts and Hijinks adventure now at darknessevents.com. Again, that is darknessevents.com.
And with the Halloween season upon us, there's no reason you can't come join us at the Palmer House Hotel in Sauk Center, Minnesota, and have an amazing time. We're going to be doing investigations, live gallery sessions. Winnie will be on hand doing tarot readings. There's going to be so much fun, plus a costume party on the very first night on Thursday. Then the rest of the weekend rolls out to have just an amazing opportunity to be there, be a part of something, and have a lot of fun meeting other like-minded people just like you that are into the paranormal and want to explore and have an experience. I just keep watching more and more people that have visited the Palmer House come back and tell me, I went in with skepticism, I came out a believer, I can't wait to go back. you be one of them. We have very limited spots still available. Less than 20 are still available. And we'd love to have you out at the Palmer House for this event in October. Go check out darknessevents.com for even more information. Chad Lewis is our guest this evening, and he has a brand new book, and gotta love it, Supernatural Lake Superior. I've always been fascinated by water. I could watch water for hours. Even when you go watch the tumultuous waves as they're crashing hard against the shorelines, and watch them rocking up against the piers and even the ships out at sea. It's beautiful, frightening, fascinating all at once. And it really does capture the attention of people. There is something magical to water. But now we know that so many tragedies have happened. So many ships have gone down, and sometimes in very mysterious circumstances. And in some cases, even like the Edmund Fitzgerald, in a very quick rate, something that it seems like they're there 1 second, gone the next. And then, to not be forgotten, the ships still sail these waters in ghostly form. How often and how many ghost ships do we know of that are stalking the waters of Lake Superior?
That's an interesting question, because if you were to put a recipe together for ghost ship sightings, you would throw in some darkness, of course, preferably a full moon evening. If it's stormy, lightning, and thunderstorms, even better.
Listen, I start talking about what are the creepy elements again, and your audio starts getting weird on us. But I don't know what's going on, Chad. You've got to, I don't know, maybe pick up a glass of water and pray to it. You've got to start to get that reconnection, because something is upsetting the balance of nature on this program today.
Well, I do have a spare goat in my backyard I can use for a ritual to help me out. But yeah, ghost ships, again, just dark, stormy nights when people see a ship that appears to be from the 17 or 1800s. It looks like it's long past its floating expiration date. And when they try to get a closer look through binoculars or their camera, it seems to either vanish or disappear right before their eyes. So the question of how many different ones there are, I don't know, because people may be seeing the same one or different ones, but they all kind of look the same to people. That it's a phantom ship going through the water that shouldn't be there. And because there have been hundreds of ships and hundreds of sailors that have lost their lives in the icy cold water of Superior, that actually putting a name to each ship is very difficult. Now, there are ships that have sunk, and we know where they are. And when divers have gone down to them, they've had weird experiences as well. One of my favorites is the Kamloops that went down in 1927, and divers went out to find its wreck, and they, of course, unfortunately, many of the bodies of the crew were still in the ship. But they kept seeing one man so much, they dubbed him Old Whitey, because they saw his spirit roaming around the ship, still attached to the place where he met his gruesome end. So we have a couple.
They would be down there diving. They would be down diving, and they would see him walking about on the ship as though it was still a fully functioning ship.
Yes, and they got an eerie feeling that he was alive, that he was still there performing his duties, even from the grave. So I like to say we have two types of ghost ships on Superior. The ones that are the ship itself sailing as though it did 100, 150 years ago, as time doesn't matter to it. And then also the ones beneath the surface that have a lot of activity. And these are specialized divers, for the most part, that are going down there. They're heavily experienced. And when they go down to these sites, like they did with the Emperor, which sank in 1947, and all of a sudden they're hearing sounds of people talking down there. And it appears as though other people are in the wreck exploring, but when they go down, they think that's impossible. We're the only people down here. And many of them have this uneasy feeling like they should not stick around, that they need to hightail it out of there as fast as they can.
It almost sounds like a vortex of supernatural things going. Maybe the vortex itself is what opened up that caused this ship to go down. and people that are down there examining it are running into phantom or future or past versions of other investigators, other divers. So there's multi-layers to these supernatural phenomena that are taking place. Now, the ships that you say are still sailing on top, when they are witnessed, are they just like empty ships that seem to be just sailing along with no sailors seen? Are they ghostly apparitions that you can see through? What is the main description for these type of vessels?
Most of the accounts I receive are from people on the shoreline that are staying at a resort or at a vacation, and they're just, like you said, just enjoying watching the water, just the waves coming in, the cargo ships going by, and it's late at night, and they're just seeing the ship itself, often under heavy fog, like it's out of a Hollywood B horror movie, and they don't get close enough of a look to see if there are staff or crew members on there. Now, I'm waiting for some night kayakers or something to brush up against one of these ghost ships and get a better look. And who knows, maybe some have, and they're just not around to tell us about it anymore because they got swiped up into whatever was there.
When we talk about the concept of the water and really how violent, I don't think people realize how, even though it's not part of the ocean, it's not the sea, the lakes can sometimes get even more tumultuous and so violent that they can lay destruction within seconds of the craft that are across them, from kayakers to major haulers, right? So there's it seems to know no boundaries, and it can be very angry.
That's the problem with being out on Lake Superior, is you have to prepare for every condition. You may go out tonight in the middle of, beginning of August, bright sunny day, 70 degrees, and 30 minutes later, it's a terrible storm. You're freezing. The waves are popping up. So you have to be on guard at all times. I think that's why there's so many wrecks on the lake, because the weather is so fickle. You just have no idea what to prepare for.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to take another very short break and give you a chance during that break to maybe mess with your microphone cord or wiggle it. We're hearing 95% of what you're saying, but there's a lot of static, a lot of crackling coming through. So I want to make sure we can give Chad the chance to shine and share more of his stories. When we come back, let's dip into the world and realm of UFOs and aliens. We'll do that when we return right here to the Paranormal 60.
How are you, Darklings? This is Mark Lanou, innovator, musician, world traveler, and no stranger to the paranormal. Come take a journey with me through this place we call life by picking up my new book, Reality Was Once the Tapestry of the Dreamer. It is available at Barnes & Noble online and will soon be available through other vendors. Get your copy by following the link in this ad or by visiting my official website at markallenlanou.com.
Are you reading me? Come in. Hello? Greetings from the Shadow, and welcome to Shadowzine. My name is Jeff Belanger. I'm an author, podcaster, and explorer of the unexplained. For 30 years, I've been investigating the paranormal, UFOs, monsters, and things that bump in the night. Lately, you may have noticed how major TV networks and even social media networks have been pushing our favorite subject back into the shadows. I say good. That's why I launched Shadowzine, a monthly underground publication that covers your favorite topics in depth by some of the leading writers and researchers out there. If you're looking for 30-second TikTok clips, go somewhere else. If you're ready for a deeper dive, put down your phone and pick up Shadowzine. You can't find it in stores. This is old school print. Head to shadowzine.com and be part of the underground revolution. That's shadowzine.com, and I'll see you in the shadow.
And I'm excited to be part of the Shadowzine family. Keep your eyes peeled, because I think my issue is coming out next month or the month after, and I'm going to be covering the Warren UFO mystery and something really exciting that I uncovered in my own investigation of the Warren UFO. All right, Chad Lewis is our guest tonight. He is the author of Supernatural Lake Superior. We have a link up for Chad's website so you can find Chad, find all of his books, and ways to keep up with his lectures, live presentations, new book releases, how to get his old books, and have all of that in one source. And it's right on today's program guide. All right, Chad, hopefully the water gods and the air gods and the radio and podcast gods are all aligned right now, and we will get through the rest of this and be able to hear you clearly. Let's discuss the UFO phenomena when it comes to the Great Lakes. Again, we believe oceans are huge and deep, and there's so many places for UFOs and UAPs to hide, but in our Great Lakes?
Well, hopefully this microphone will bear with me.
Yep.
But yes, I'm amazed at how many UFO sightings I've discovered and people have told me about over the years. That I've done a lot of lectures along the lake, all the way from the North Shore of Minnesota through Wisconsin and Michigan. And people would come up to me telling me their lake UFO stories. And sometimes these things are balls of light hovering over the waters or craft moving about and then disappearing. But many times people were telling me they would see these things coming in and out of the water as though the water's not even there. No ripples, no splash, no wave, that they could see lights under the water, almost patrolling the shoreline as though they were looking for someone or something.
Now, we know that there's bioluminescent algae, which means algae that glows and it can shift with the tides in the water. Does that exist as well in places like Lake Superior?
I don't know of any in Lake Superior, and certainly nothing that would account for what these witnesses were telling me. And many times these stories are accompanied by something else. For instance, there was a woman who was watching the water one day, beautiful day, just watching the gorgeous water, when she sees a traditional UFO saucer-like ship out in the water. And she watches it for a few moments, and then it simply vanishes from her sight. Whether it flew off at great speeds or simply disappeared, she didn't know. But she starts walking back to her car in the nearby parking lot. She's excited, not because she's interested in UFOs, but because her son is a UFO enthusiast. So she's ready to go home and tell him, hey, I just spotted a UFO. And on the way to her car, she said two men in dark suits approached her and started telling her that it would be best for her health if she did not mention the UFO she had just spotted. And
wow,
she was amazed because not only had she not talked about it, she hadn't even made it to her car yet. So she goes home after being threatened by these two men and tells her son that there were some strange men, weird, wearing suits along the lake when everyone's in beach shorts and tank tops. And the son said, Mom, that's the traditional Men in Black story. You had an encounter with the Men in Black, I think. And she did come forward and tell me this story, which I was grateful for. But by all accounts, she seemed to have been approached by at least two out-of-place men, maybe Men in Black, that were very gung-ho about her not talking about a simple UFO sighting over the lake.
And that's weird. It's as though they already knew this was going to happen. Were they there to watch and witness and see how people reacted? Were they there to make sure that whatever was coming in and out of this lake was not going to interfere with the humans? That's where all these strange questions line up, right?
Yeah, were they simply observing it? Were they monitoring it? Or were they participating with it? And that's the question, because so many of these sightings of these strange Men in Black like types, they often occur before, during, or directly after. And she was amazed because it happened so quick after that they wouldn't have been able to arrive on the scene if somebody had called it into wherever they might call it in. There was no way they could have reached her remote location without having been there. And what are two men in suits doing lurking about the lake when a UFO is present? She really didn't want to get into that.
You've done a lot of research and looked into many different stories. When it comes to the Men in Black, do you think that they're governmental employees, shadow government? Do you think that they are the aliens themselves trying to keep us from talking about what we've just experienced? Where do you think they fit into the lexicon of strange and unusual?
If I had to put them somewhere, I'd probably lean more to the side of something other than just some top secret government officials, because unless they're master manipulators, because oftentimes they seem to act very strange that a typical person wouldn't do. Like they don't know how to use a pen or water, but don't seem to know how to drink it or operate mechanical things like a doorknob, just things that would be very hard to fake, and for what reason. And oftentimes, they appear too close to UFOs to be a government official responding to a report. Maybe they know of it already and that's why they're there, and that's a possibility. But because they act so weird and are unusual and seemingly have supernatural-esque powers, that I would probably lean to put them in a category of something else. What that something else is, I have no idea.
What about encounters with these craft in the water? Do you ever think that these craft may be responsible for some of the sinking of these ships?
That was one of the theories that a lot of people that had witnessed these things were telling me, that it could easily just run into your canoe or a bigger ship altogether, because it was almost as though they used the water. I don't know if it's an underwater base or they were using it for power or energy or what, but it seemed as though they needed to go into the water, because what other purpose would there be? Are they going looking at the wrecks? Are they looking for sturgeon? But it seems as though they have great importance of being there for some reason. And many times, witnesses just kind of brushed it off to me like, well, it's no big deal. I jog along the lake all the time. I see these lights over and over and over. So they weren't as excited about their sightings as you might think someone that has never experienced it would be.
You brought up sturgeon, right? A lot of these lakes have these strange water creatures that are sighted. And for those of you like me, I'm a very passive fisherman. I used to go with my grandfather. On occasion, I'd go with my dad. We were always catching sunnies and bass, and it was something small and manageable. I was first introduced to one of the creepiest fish I've ever seen when I went fishing with my grandfather in Louisiana. And when we got back to shore, we had a couple of big catfish. And one of the gentlemen on the shore said, "Hey, Mr. Cliff," to my grandfather, he goes, "You want to trade one of those catfish and I'll give you a gar?" My grandfather said, "What's a gar?" And he showed us this alligator gar that was probably 4 feet long. It looked like something straight out of a Jurassic Park movie. And its armor was insane. My poor grandfather probably lost 8 years of his life just trying to figure out how to skin this thing and prepare it. It was terrifying. And then I hear people saying, well, sturgeon. I always pictured a sturgeon as probably just a bigger bass or something. And you look them up and my God, they're huge, massive creatures that are amongst us. And I think a lot of lay people see these things, and that doesn't look like the kind of fish that's not Dory. That's not Nemo. That doesn't look like a fish. That must be some kind of creature. But I've also wondered, in these areas where UFOs and what is the ones underwater? What do they call those? USOs, unidentified submerged objects. What if these aren't beasts so much, but they are the aliens outside of the craft just swimming about in the water, and we're mistaking them for that? I mean, has anybody ever kind of leaned into that prospect, that it's not a sturgeon, it's not an eel, it's nothing of this world, it's one of the inhabitants of the craft that we see entering and leaving these waters?
First, if you're swimming in the water and an alligator gar or a sturgeon brushes up against you, you're going to think it's a sea monster, because it is.
Yeah.
It's a portal back millions of years ago to these prehistoric looking fish. If you want to see Jurassic Park in real life, just go catch a sturgeon or an alligator gar. It sounds like you have another book idea here, because I haven't heard a lot of theories of most people who see something that they're certain it's not a sturgeon or an alligator gar or anything else. It's 30 feet long and humped like creature or a 12-inch diameter. I haven't heard the theory from them that they think it's part of the craft or associated with UFOs, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me. It kind of bears similarity to the UFO idea of Bigfoot being a captured creature from a UFO, or all these grays or other beings are actually creatures with the UFO. So if it's above water, I guess why not underwater as well? And it would be, if you're trying not to be spotted, one, you're doing a great job because you're underwater, but two, if you could kind of blend in as a creature looking thing down there, that would be the perfect way to camouflage yourself.
Well, I think what we've got to do, Chad, is that I just need you to sit there with a notepad and I'll rattle off all my weird thoughts. And the next Chad Lewis book can be The Rambling Paranormal Thoughts of Dave Schrader, as translated by Chad Lewis. What do you think?
We have a couple great options already. In fact, if one of your viewers doesn't do a book on these topics, they're really going to miss out.
Now, talking about the creatures, let's dive into that. Pardon the pun. What about sea creatures in Lake Superior? Do we have things like Champ and Nessie that are seen and witnessed?
I think the problem with Lake Superior is we don't have that Loch Ness or Lake Champlain's Champ or the Ogopogo where there's one type of sighting mostly. Whereas in Lake Superior, as I said, we get a couple different sightings. One, you get the water panther, Mississippi, and that's a whole different thing. But then you have sightings of your traditional Loch Ness monster looking thing with a long neck and some humps. But then you get that more of almost a giant snake or eel. Again, 30 to 40 feet long, huge diameter. And I don't know if people are seeing these things from different angles or perceiving them different, or if they are actually different types of beings being in the water. So I think if Lake Superior had your traditional Loch Ness only, it would be easy to slap a name on it and give it great publicity. But because there's so many varying sightings that it becomes very hard to pin it down. And I'll give you a quick story. A gentleman was in Two Harbors, Minnesota at the dentist, and his dentist happened to have a beautiful overlook to Lake Superior in the window. And what a great dentist to go to. And he was waiting for the dentist to come in, and he saw what he thought were dolphins with their dorsal fins swimming out in Lake Superior. And he thought, that's odd. I don't remember dolphins ever being in the lake. So he gets out of the chair, walks to the window, and takes a closer look. And lo and behold, it's not the dorsal fins of dolphins. It's the fins of a large hump-like creature, moving like you would think the Loch Ness Monster would. And as soon as he got a good look, these things descended below the surface and did not reappear. And he didn't tell the dentist or any of the staff about it, thinking they might think he was crazy. But he was convinced he had seen the Loch Ness Monster on Lake Superior.
Let's say, I know we don't have a whole lot of time together, about another 10 minutes or so. What are some of your other favorite creepy tales surrounding the myths and legends and lore of Lake Superior?
My all-time favorite is probably the Wendigo. And you think of the Wendigo as this cannibalistic monster of the North Woods, that when times were tough and food was scarce and game were nowhere to be found, you might think about resorting to cannibalism. And that's when the Wendigo would show up when you were at your weakest mentally, physically, and spiritually. And it could show up in a physical form, like a bear, but as big as it wanted to be, thin, skeletal, emaciated, or it could show up in spirit form and possess you and slowly turn you into a Wendigo. And these stories are old, very old. Many of the cultures that first originated these stories don't know the origin. It's just always been there. And you might think, great, Chad, that's superstition from 500 years ago, but many places around the Great Lake still believe the Wendigo resides. I'll give you a quick example. After a program I was doing on northern Minnesota along the lake by Grand Marais, a woman came up to me and said that when she was a child, they lived right up by the Canadian border near the lake. And her father used to tell her and all the other kids that were playing together that if you ever heard a kettle being struck in the woods, get home as fast as you can, because that meant the Wendigo was on the prowl and it was coming after you. And this woman told me that she never did hear that kettle being struck, but it stuck with her. She was in her 80s when she told me this story.
Wow.
And that fear of the Wendigo still stuck with her 7+ decades later. That's the fear that people had of this Wendigo beast walking along the area of Lake Superior.
What about Bigfoot encounters or dogman? Are there many sightings of creatures like that also surround Lake Superior?
Yeah, there's a lot of dogmen, and one of my favorites is in Beta Gree. It's an old singing beach, and it's a beach along the lake, of course, and it is said that when you push down on the sand, you'll hear the cries and the singing of a woman who lost her love out on the water and is forever waiting for his return, singing like a siren to entice him back to the safety of land. And while you have the singing sand there, people often talk about a werewolf type creature roaming that area as well. And of course, in Michigan, we have stories of the witchy wolves, which were spiritual protectors of the land there. And the same seems to be prevalent in Lake Superior, that they seem to be there for protection reasons, that your typical werewolf or dogman, 4 to 6 to 8 feet tall, covered in a thick matted down fur, walking upright on his hind legs like you and I do. Sometimes these things scare teenagers, like at Trowbridge Campground. Just when you go up into Thunder Bay, Canada, you'll get to this campground where all sorts of weird things happen, from dogman sightings to hauntings, but then it's kind of a lover's lane, the campground parking lot. Teenagers go there from the prying eyes of their family or police. And over the years, so many of them started reporting that this mysterious, odd-looking man, if you will, is peering in to their vehicle, watching them, and the vehicle starts to shake and move as though some heavy force is engaging with it. And over the years, so many people experienced him that they started dubbing him the Undertaker. And nobody knows if he's just some weird maniac from the community or some supernatural entity. But for decades, he's been terrorizing those who are brave enough or foolish enough to venture out to this campground.
Let me float another thought past you here. I like being able to talk with you and just bouncing ideas. I did an episode of the Holzer Files. We visited the Morris Jumel Mansion in New York. And much to our surprise and the surprise of the caretakers of the Morris Jumel Mansion, we didn't run into so much the spirits of the mansion. I mean, they were definitely there and we had contact, but it seemed that what was there was something more primal, something more natural, nature. We found out that this property in the middle of New York City is one of the few properties that's just this beautiful park. And in and around the area, there are a lot of Santeria practitioners. And what they do is they come there and they worship, they do their things to the woods, to the plants and the deals, but they also leave behind, I guess, their negativity, that they're giving it to nature to take away from them. And I wonder if the indigenous tribes around those areas had similar practices where they would go to the water's edge to get rid of or purge the negativity, the demonic, the whatever their realm of that would be. And if that's kind of what's opened up this area to be so ripe with activity, from monsters to angry waters to unidentified lights to ghost ships, could it be that this has become a paranormal nexus point because this is where so many people come to worship in a way and leave their troubles?
What you're describing, I believe, also is like pushing a rock downhill, that once an area becomes known for its weirdness, it attracts more people looking for it trying to experience it or trying to bring it forth. And it only creates a snowball effect that as more and more people go out there looking, bringing their thoughts, bringing their fears, that more things happen, which in turn brings more people there. So the idea that this would be a cleansing place, almost a closet, if you will, or container of some sort of people dumping all negativity, does that then create a paranormal portal or vortex or these beacons where, as I said, at the campground, at Trowbridge Campground, I mean, you have hellhound stories, you have dogman, you have ghosts, you have weird creatures running through. Statistically, it shouldn't have all these things, but yet it does. So I think that's a very fascinating theory.
Just a few minutes left together. What's the next project you're working on?
Well, I'm going from the big woods of Lake Superior to the big woods of the North Woods, and I'm doing a collection of Paul Bunyan places to visit and tall tales of
cool.
Paul in the North Woods. And obviously, no one beats your state of Minnesota for Paul Bunyan roadside attractions, but we have our fair share in Wisconsin, and Michigan tags along for the fun of it as well. So I'm really getting interested in those stories. And sometimes I really need a break from your meat and potatoes paranormal of UFOs, cryptids, and ghosts, where I kind of go off on these weird paranormal adjacent folklore, oddities, tall tales. So that's what I'm doing, a pet project that I've been meaning to do for decades. So I figured, hey, I survived Lake Superior. Now's the time to do it, because who knows if I'll survive my next adventure.
Now your adventure begins. Supernatural Lake Superior, the book by Chad Lewis, out and available. We have a link for it on today's program guide, and to find Chad Lewis and all of the great places he's going to be, and get a chance, if you get a chance, go see him live, because his presentations are fantastic, educational, a lot of fun, and you get to learn a lot about the history and surrounding areas, especially when it comes to this Midwestern area that we live in. Chad, thank you so much for being here with us, buddy. I always appreciate catching up with you.
Thank you, and keep an eye out.
Oh, I've got two, and I'm keeping them both out. And I hope all of you will keep your eye out as well for more strange and supernatural things. Lake Superior has claimed thousands of lives, but it may also be holding on to something much more. Memories, energy, spirits. From phantom ships still seen drifting through the fog to whispers in haunted lighthouses and the chilling echoes of creatures not found in biology books. These stories remind us that the line between folklore and fact is much blurrier than we thought. A very special thank you to Chad Lewis for taking us on this eerie tour around the world's largest freshwater tomb. And remember, may the darkness of this world be just a little lighter with the information that we share here each week. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is your Paranormal 60.